Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan and welcome once again to the vast and ominous comic book vault. It's time once again for more Tick Month, and today I'm bringing to you two more Tick Omnibuses. These are actually the final two. So we've got Omnibus number 4, which is Circus of the Mighty, and number 5, which is the final two issues of both Maneating Cow and Paul the Samurai. They both went for 10 issues, and the final two of each of them crossed into each other in a crossover event called Crisis on Finite Tick Spinoffs, which is quite hilarious. So we're going to take a look at both of these today. Circus of the Mighty, there's not a whole lot to say about because it's pretty much the Tick comic book encyclopedia. Pretty much the closest thing we got to Encyclopedia for the Tick. It was published as 3 issues and then collected in this, and it's completely alphabetical. And then at the end, there are some extra entries about some of the characters from earlier in it, because I guess some other comics were published after the first two came out, so they came back and revisited some of these characters. But it pretty much tells you what was in those comics in case you didn't get a chance to read them. And I think it embellishes a little bit, though I haven't read all of this, and gives even some more information about some of these characters that weren't directly in the comics. There's a lot of neat art in this, and there are some fun diagrams and things like that. And so it's definitely worth taking a look at. But there's not a whole lot to say about it because it's pretty much just an encyclopedia. And then I want to take a look once again at Omnibus number 5. So what this does is it takes the Tick and puts him in Japan. And the Tick says, hey, I had no idea there were ninjas in Japan, which is his first big joke and quite funny. This book is not primarily about the Tick, however, even though he's there, because, as I said, it's about Maneating Cow and Paul the Samurai, or at least it's in their books. It's pretty much just a story for Paul the Samurai with a lot of other supporting characters, and it uses the Tick much more in a supporting capacity, but I think it's quite good. This is, by the way, written by Clay Griffith, and I think part of the success of this book, and by the way, I like it quite a bit, is that one person wrote all 4 of these. He's writing the Maneating Cow issues as well as the Paul the Samurai issues, and it's drawn by 2 people. It's drawn by Dave Garcia, who is drawing Paul the Samurai, and Alan Hopkins, who draws the Maneating Cow. I think that it takes you out a little bit that there's 2 different artists doing this, especially because it bounces back and forth. So you get the first issue by one artist and the second issue by another artist, and then it goes back to the first artist because of the way it was published, because it starts with Paul the Samurai and then goes to Maneating Cow and then goes back to Paul the Samurai again. But they're both competent artists. I prefer David Garcia a little bit over Alan Hopkins, just because I think that Hopkins' art is a little bit over-inked. But other than that, I think that they're both quite good. I also just like Dave Garcia's art because I think that it looks quite a bit like what Ben Edlund was doing. So the biggest thing that struck me about this book was that Paul the Samurai is characterized somewhat differently than how he was in the Ben Edlund run. I think that and I complained about this when I reviewed Ben Edlund's books. I think that there, Paul the Samurai and the Tick talk a little bit too much alike, and he's a little bit too goofy. And I like what's done with him here, because he's still extremely goofy, but he very clearly is not aware of it. And I don't know, I don't think he was aware of it before either, but I think that what we get here is absurdity that comes out of some real ideas. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I felt about it. For instance, there's this really amusing moment where his mother is being attacked by ninjas, and he tells the ninjas that he will pull his mother's arms out of her sockets if he has to rescue her, and that's precisely what he does. And he's completely serious, but it's a really absurd kind of moment. And then he runs off with his mother, and she says, "Oh, I think my arms are dislocated." And he says, "I'll pop them back in, mother." And he's completely no nonsense in this in a way that he wasn't in Ben Edlund's run. You see him with a broom, but not a big roll of bread. And I think he's just using a broom because it was his mother's, and it's quite funny. So anyway, it's pretty much a character arc for Paul the Samurai. And what happens is Sagan returns, who was the big ninja that he and the Tick both fought together in Ben Edlund's comics. And Paul the Samurai has kind of a chip on his shoulder. This, by the way, is the other artist. This is Alan Hopkins. But anyway, Paul the Samurai has kind of a chip on his shoulder a little bit over what happened with Sagan, because Sagan is his arch nemesis. And he feels like the Tick took some honor away from him by stopping Sagan by himself, and he doesn't like that. So a lot of the comedy mileage that comes out of this book is the idea of other people defeating Sagan, and Paul the Samurai not getting a chance to do it by himself. And at the very end of the book, and by the way, once again, like with other Tick reviews, I am going to spoil the ending, and I am going to talk about a lot of what happens in this in case you never get a chance to read it yourself. So if you don't want to know, go ahead and stop this video right now. But at the end, it in fact is, in order to make her important in this, it actually is the Maneating Cow who defeats Sagan and once again takes away Paul the Samurai's victory. So Sagan's big plan in this is quite funny. What he decides to do is he's going to... first of all, he was killed. I don't think I mentioned that. He was killed originally in Ben Edlund's run, and then somehow or other he comes back to life. And it's played up like, oh, villains always come back to life. And so he returns, he comes back to life, and he's got three big things he wants to do. The first thing he wants to do is he wants to kill the Tick. And the second thing he wants to do is he wants to enslave Paul the Samurai, who we find out is actually his brother, in kind of a fun comic book trope where the bad guy and the good guy are related somehow. And then the third thing he wants to do, of course, is take over the world because, well, he's a supervillain, and supervillains want to do that. And so his big plan is he's going to steal the energy from America's youth by inventing something that looks a whole lot like a Game Boy. And it's quite hilarious, and I like the social commentary of he's going to make these kids just sit around and use all their energy doing something completely non-productive, and then he's going to take that energy and he's going to take over the world with it. So what he does is he takes the city, he takes all of his ninjas and he brings them back to the city, which freaks everybody out because there haven't been any ninjas there for a long time. And I really like how he goes back to Ben Edlund. He does a really good job of building some continuity with that. And anyway, he builds a big bubble around the city, which he manages to do with the energy that he gets from teenagers playing Game Boys that he harnesses through the sword that he stole from Paul the Samurai. Paul the Samurai has a magic sword that Sagan stole from him. And so he's able to, basically, there's all this mumbo-jumbo that we get from this science guy that Paul the Samurai is friends with. And he tells him that Sagan can take another dimension and put it in our dimension. And basically what he does with it is he turns the city into another Japan that keeps expanding out. I think it says like 35 feet per day or something ridiculous. And meanwhile, in Japan, before Paul the Samurai and the Tick managed to get back to the city, there's all these fun little subplots that happen, especially with Japan, because Griffith is getting a lot of comedy mileage out of doing fun Japanese tropes. So he's not only parroting superhero comics, but he's also parroting Japanese monster movies. And so we have this big Godzilla-like monster who goes to sleep, who's like destroying everything, and then he suddenly just decides to take a nap. And there are these two heroes, I think they're also from America, or maybe, no, actually, I think they're British. And one of them is Captain Academia and his sidekick Hollow Point, which is hilarious. And I love Captain Academia because he just goes around spouting platitudes and using big words and not saying anything that's remotely helpful for the situation, but they all sound really profound. And they think that they need to stop this Godzilla-like monster, but then Paul the Samurai is like, well, he always just goes back off to his cave for a few years, and then he comes back, and this is Japan, and we're used to this, and leave us alone. And it's very funny. So then we get into the central plot of the story, where, again, Sagan is in the city, and he's built his big dome, And ultimately, to make a long story short, the Tick and Paul the Samurai and Maneating Cow all get together, and along with a couple other superheroes, and they fight off all of Sagan's minions, including this giant robot who thinks he can disguise himself by wearing one of these old-fashioned silly glasses with a nose, and of course it works. And the Tick's like, oh, I never would have seen that coming. He sees this big robot, and the disguise works on him, and then then it comes off, and he's like, wow, it's a robot. I had no idea. And I love the name of this last story, Lo, a cow shall lead them. It's quite great. So as I said, they pretty much fight Sagan, and Paul the Samurai in all of this, in this last issue just before this, in Paul the Samurai number 9, or number 10 rather, of course, ends up getting a magic spell put on him by Sagan and actually becomes his minion, just like he was wanting. He manages to enslave him, and so the Tick and the Man-Eating Cow have to stop him and then make him, get him back to his normal self again. But then at the end, it turns out that he actually was just faking it, and he breaks the sword himself. Which, by the way, earlier on, he makes a huge deal out of. Oh no, I don't want to have to break my own sword, because again, it's a big honorable thing. It's his special magic sword, and it's one of those was in his family lineage for generations and that sort of thing. But finally, he breaks it, and ultimately, the big joke is the Man-Eating Cow kills Sagan, and Paul the Samurai loses his sword, and unfortunately doesn't really have much to show for it, except that Sagan is gone, and it's all horrible for him, and that's kind of the big joke. And then right at the very end, they're really making fun of crossovers, and so they decided it would be fun to put as many Tick characters as they can in 2 pages here at Yogurt Depot, which according to the Tick is a place where superheroes and supervillains can just all get together and hang out. And this is a really fun picture. We get to see the Chainsaw Vigilante again up there next to the sign of the Yogurt Depot, and we see the Forehead, and Pineapple Pokapo is there, and Oedipus is there, and it's a really neat picture. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about with Maneating Cow and Paul the Samurai. Again, they each had a 10-issue series, and they have their own stories, and I'm not going to go into those through Tick Month because there's some other Tick things I want to talk about. Other things coming up pretty soon on Tick Month. I'm going to be doing a top 10 episodes for the animated series. I was going to do full-blown reviews for all 3 seasons, but we're starting to run out of time a little bit, and I thought that would be maybe a few too many superhero rewinds on the Tick. So I decided to just do a top 10, and also going to review the live-action series toward the end of the month. I'm even going to review here pretty soon the Tick board game, which you may or may not know exists. And so lots of fun stuff coming up. Look forward to that. Lots of other fun videos, non-Tick related, coming up as well. Thanks everybody for watching and subscribing. Be sure to check out wearegeeksnotnerds.com, and remember that the Comic Book Vault is a vast and wondrous wonderland of comic books that you can both donate things to and buy things from. If you go to our website, you can click on the Comic Vault, see what we have for sale on eBay right now. I'm going to put a bunch more stuff up this week, and you can also donate stuff if you want to. And our P.O. Box, I don't actually have that up here right now, but if you want to ever send anything to us, our P.O. Box is Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285, and that'll be in the link below. Thanks as always for watching. I'm Captain Logan, and happy reading.